Welcome back. So in our Selenium with Java series, we are looking into the TestNG features. So one of the TestNG feature is the TestNG parameterization, right? So we can get the multiple sets of data from different sources into the TestNG. Your TestNG method or your before test or after test, any kind of test annotations we have. Now in our previous sessions, we have seen actually how we can use the data provider, like where we can have multiple sets of test data. Based on the test data, I mean the test cases will be running that many times, so it is kind of giving us an option to provide us the data. Instead of taking the data from the Excel sheet, you can use the data provider. Even we have seen how you can get the Excel data from an Excel sheet into the data provider, because data provider normally helps you to run your test cases multiple times automatically. Now that's kind of we will use the data provider when we need multiple sets of test data, right? Now what about if you need specific test data, which is you don't want to execute your test case or your test ng test multiple times, it's just one time you want to run your test, but you want to get the data from somewhere, like maybe for an instance, let's say that you want to get what kind of browser, what is the username, what is the password, and what is the URL. So this basic information you need. Now this is basically we will need when we use our before test or before class or before shoot annotations, right? Because that is required to initialize your driver. So that is one of the use case of that. So today we will see one sample demo of what is the TestNG parameterization, and then we will see how we can use that in our Selenium. Fine. Okay. So now if you go to the testng.org, this is the official documentation. Here you will see the test methods don't have two parameter or don't have to be parameter less. You can use the arbitrary number of parameters in each of your test method, and the test data you can get it from the testng xml programmatically. So one of the sample they've given, think about this is one of your test method, which is very simple, right? Now you can see there is a string before whatever the test, what do you call testng test we were seeing, there was no what do you call parameterization. Only in data provider we used to give that, but there is, you will see some another annotation that is parameters. Okay, now which is saying first name. So this particular test method need one parameter, first name. Now this is the variable, right? This first name is coming to this parameter, and we can use it inside my test case. Now the question comes, from where I will assign the data? Is it my notepad or an Excel sheet or some kind of XML? So the answer is your testng.xml file. Now this is your testng XML sample file, right? Where you have to add this line. Now parameter name is basically the parameter name, and there has to be a value. So this data will now go inside this test method. So that is how. So when you execute this one, like let's say this is your testng test, if you go right click, it won't run actually, because it will ask whether, I mean you have to provide what you call the string value, and that will only come when you run your testng xml. So let me quickly show you that, and then I will show you another feature of this parameterization. Then we will implement that into our test case. Okay, so let me go back to our existing code base. So here if you see we have this testng learning, right? And now let me right click this one, create a new package, and maybe let me say that parameter. Okay, now inside this I will have to create a new test. So for this, let me do one thing. I'll just right click this one, copy, and then inside this parameter let me paste it, and I'll just say, so I will have to, what I have to do, I have to make a parameter, right? So here you have to do the parameter. Now you can see parameters, it is coming from testng. Here what I need to do, I need to provide the name. Let's say that first thing is that I need to get the browser, then I need to get the URL. Okay, and now this has to go into double quotes. Okay, now if I have edge, I have two parameters, I have to create two different parameters inside this method. So I can give any name actually here. Doesn't matter that has to be same name. Now there it is browser. Now here it is browser name. Now another is, let's say that browser URL. Okay. Now here I can use them. So what I can do here, let me print this one, give some space, and then another one, and then browser URL. Okay. So now if I run this test case, now let's see what happens. Now you can see it is throwing some exception actually. What is that exception? It is telling testng exception. So here it is telling parameter, the browser and your URL. This is basically is required by test method but not marked as optional. I'll show you that in a moment. But at this moment, just consider that this browser and URL data has to come from somewhere. So if I'm giving the parameter, I cannot run here directly, except I have to make it optional as a parameter. That I will show you in a moment. But as per the documentation, to get the data, I can have my testng XML, right? So for this, let me go to this, and here let me just copy and paste it so that we can change as we need. So while pasting, I'll just say testng underscore parameter so that it will link to this parameter. Let's add this one, and let's just keep only one test only, as I have only one test case, so I will just keep it here. Okay, and another one. Fine. Now here what I'm going to do, testng learning and then parameter, and then the actual test case is what is that? That is actually sample, right? So sample parameter test. Now here if I run this one, let's see what happens now. Again the same thing, because parameter is required, browser, and your URL is required, browser and URL. I don't know why it is not showing, but yeah, the two parameters you need actually. Maybe probably this is the first parameter it is looking and it didn't found. That's why here itself only it give the exception. It didn't even go to this one. So now here we need to implement the parameter concept here. So what I can do here, so I'll write one more element. Now you can see parameter, and it is giving me a template where I can give the parameter name, that is browser, and the actual value. Let's say that I want to send Chrome as a value, and here let me shorten this one. Now another parameter is there, right? That is URL. So here I will write URL, and I'll just keep some name here. Now if I run this one, this shouldn't give me any errors now, and you can see, so Chrome is the browser, okay, and this is the actual URL, and this is coming. Now you can see from this parameter how it is coming. You have to run this XML only file. Now if I run this one, even I have that XML, if I run this one, I shouldn't be getting that error. I mean, I should be getting that error because data is not provided here. So one concept is that if you are using parameters, this annotation, you have to execute the test case from the testng XML, because it need a source, right, which can assign the value to this test case. Now let's consider one more scenario. If I am blocking this one, let's say that I'm commenting here. Now see how many parameters I'm providing, only one parameter, right? Now let's right click and run this one, and as you can see here, it is throwing one error, that URL. I told you, right? When you execute the browser, when it didn't found browser, that time the exception was coming. But now in this case, because browser is there, it came here successfully. So this browser is properly allocated. Now the control is coming to this URL. Now it is searching whether there is a parameter like this element with the name URL is there or not there. It is not there. So it's throwing error. Now here you can see one suggestion it is giving. Let's see that. What it is telling, if you don't have the value into this testng XML, no need to worry about that. You can mark that particular parameter as optional. Either you mark it as optional, or else you have to define that. Define in the sense you have to uncomment this one. That is what it is telling. Now let me first use this optional concept. So what you need to do, you need to use one optional keyword here. So let me just write that. So here you need to do at the rate, and you will say optional. You can see it is coming, and it is coming from annotation, the testng annotation only. Now this optional, you need to provide the value actually here. What should be the URL if it is not coming from your testng XML? Let's say that if it is not coming from the testng XML, I can say maybe this one. Okay, I can just write like this and then make this string. So what we'll do, if the data is there, let me show you that. So if there is a data, think about this. There is some data is there. Now I'm right clicking and running the test. And you can see the data is going from this testng XML only, Chrome, and then this particular URL which I have assigned here. Let me comment it this time. Now this time I shouldn't be getting any errors because I have made that optional. Now let me right click and run this one. And as you can see, it is coming Chrome, and then it is coming here the source demo. Now from where this item is coming? So this is coming from this optional. Optional means if the browser URL is not defined into the testng.xml, you take this as a default value into my test case. So the same thing, like let's say that browser is there, right? For some instance, let's say that people tend to forget that to assign the browser value. So what you can do, you can just write optional. So you can do optional, and inside this you write the default, it should take it as a Chrome. So if you are not specifying anything into your testng XML, then by default you take this as a Chrome browser. Now because I have made both of these parameters as optional, I can even comment this entire testng XML data. Now if I right click and run this one, I should be getting the default value Chrome and this one. At the same time, I can even run this one as well. So I can right click and run this test directly. And as you can see, the data is coming because I made it optional. So that's why the values, for sure, the first priority would go to the testng XML only. Okay. If into your testng XML the parameters are mentioned or it is defined, it will fetch, else it will take the optional stuff. That is the main logic here. Okay, now let's see, there are some other features are as well there. For an instance, if I write this particular parameter, let's say that the same thing I will write at the top actually here. Okay, I can have actually, so this particular parameter is not just limited to the test tag only. Even at the shoot level also you can define this parameter. So now let's see what is really happening if you do this one. So let me right click and run this one, and you can see it is coming actually this value. In fact, let me change this one to google.com. Now let me run this one. Now you can see it is coming this value only, like whatever it is mentioned inside this test level, it is taking. So though we have the same name, here also URL is there, here also URL is there, but for this particular class or the test, the main priority is the immediate parameter name which I am declaring here. But let's see that if I want to run the same test again, I can have the same test run multiple times, right? In this case, I don't want to give any parameters here. And let's change this name to 2 as well, because I have to give two different names, right? So what am I doing here? You can see. So this is my regression 1 test. Okay. And then there is another test which is regression 2. I'm using the same test methods only, but here I'm not giving any parameters. You can see this test, this particular test don't have any parameters inside, but this test has its own parameters here. But I have a global parameter actually here. Now let's see what exactly happens here. So as you can see, first time, because this has to execute in a what do you call sequential order, right? So you can see the first regression executed, then the regression 2 executed. So this is my first test execution, which is nothing but this one. Now you can see the data is coming from here, browser, and then the URL is coming what? https.qab box. So here you can see this is coming. Now for this particular test case, as I don't have any data, the data is coming from parameter here. Now what about this Chrome? From where it is coming? So it is coming from this optional actually. Let me show you that, because both are Chrome, so you might get confused. Now at this moment, let me rerun it again. And as you can see, the first test executed, the parameter browser is Chrome and URL is this one, which is done with this one. But for this particular class, first thing, this is looking for two parameters. First is browser, right? So immediately there is no parameters are allocated. So it is going to the global, not this one actually, because this is very much this particular two variables, these two parameters are scope is limited to this test only. Now this is a different test, so this has to look for anything that is at shoot level. Yes, there is at the shoot level is there. What about the browser? This particular test cannot get it from here, so that's why the optional came into the picture. Okay, so there are three different ways. One, first it will look inside this test if there is any parameters are there or not there, else it will look for global parameter. If this global parameter is also not present, then it will look for the optional value. So that is what it is printing here. You have to be very much careful when you are what you call declaring all these things. Or else one good practice, what I would say, if you don't want any complications, I would say rather not to keep these parameter values and the key value pair at the test level, whether it is safe to put at the global level, so that any test methods you are creating here, it can access these values. Okay, so that is about your parameterization. So these are different concepts of your parameter, the TestNG feature. Now the question comes where we can utilize this one. Now one of the use case I can say, think about this. You have a base test is there, right? Now this base test you have something called as before test, before class and everything. Now in the before class you are writing the logic to launch your browser, to instantiate your driver object. Now to launch your browser you need two different things is there, right? One is your browser, another is your URL. So what we can do now here, instead of even writing all these concepts here, rather you keep all the test cases here. You make a base test. Let me show you the prototype of that. So let me just write this one as base, and then inside this let me create one public void and I will say setup. Okay, and now this has to be like this, and now here I'm giving the before test, let's say that. Okay, now inside this I will be writing parameter. See, that parameter annotation is not limited to just at the rate test only. Even before test we can give that. See here, you can do like this, and you give two different, one is browser and another is your URL, right? Now here what I need to do, the same thing, let me copy paste it from here. Okay, and come to this base test, add it here, and here what you can do, write the logic, to launch your browser with URL, as simple as that. Okay, so like that I can do. I'll show you one real-time example. So for this I'll do one thing, I'll comment this one and I'll just keep this one only, and here what I'm going to do, I'll delete everything. This will just print test case executed, just something it is telling here. That's it. Now here what I'm going to do, this base, let me write some logic quickly. Let me copy paste that logic. So what I can do, I can go to this browser Firefox test and I will copy paste all these things, go to the base test, write it here and here. So the instead of this you just write Chrome, because I'm executing Chrome, right? So Chrome driver. Okay, and here instead of Firefox I will say Chrome driver. Now in this case what I'm going to do, now this is actually my Chrome browser, right? So here even I can do if browser name equal to a dot equals, let's say dot equal ignore case. If it is Chrome, it means that if the Chrome value is coming from the testng XML, then you go with the Chrome driver here. Okay, and I can even make it more better actually. Let me show you exactly how we write normally. Now here I can make it as a else condition. Now here I'll say this one. So I'm at this moment I'm expecting either it should be Chrome or it should be Firefox actually. So in that convention I'm taking this one, and here I'll say Gecko driver. Okay, Gecko driver, I'm taking it. Now here it should be Firefox. Fine. Now you see, I don't need to hard code actually this one. For Chrome, I need to write this one. For Firefox, I need to write. No need to mention anything. Just here you put the browser as Chrome or Firefox, your test case will run. You don't need to write separately. This is just one time only. Into the before test, you need to write this one. Now in this case, driver.get, I don't want to hard code it. I'll simply say browser name. So whatever the browser name I'm sending from there, that should come here. So I'll wait for some time. Let's wait for 2 seconds and then I will say driver.quit. That's it. And here let's import, add this exception. That's it. Now what I can do, I can come back here. Let me comment this one at this moment. And here also you delete this one, you don't need. Now here I am taking the browser as Chrome, and URL I am taking this one actually. Let's see if this executes or not. And you can have as many as test cases with that parameter. Oh, okay. So here what I need to do, I need to. So this is actually base test, right? Base test is basically, but how do I link it to my actual test case? So here I need to extend that one. In real time, we do that. Extends what? That base, and that is coming from the parameter. So now what will happen whenever I will execute this one or my testng XML file? First it will come to this, it will see if it is extending to something or not. In the base actually what is there? Before test is there, so before test will execute first, then this particular test case will execute. Now I can have as many as the test cases, I can write it here, maybe 50 test cases. No need to worry about that. The only one thing that I need to do is that extends base. It means that in the base class you write only once all this logic, you execute as many, you execute that as many as test cases you want. So that is what I'm doing here. Right click, run. And as you can see, it is launching my Chrome browser because I have sent Chrome as a parameter value from the testng XML. Let's see what is the problem here. It's not launching that. It has to be browser URL actually. That's why it is not launching there. So let me go back here and then right click, run. And as you can see, now it loaded the URL. That's it. Now you can add as many as test cases you want and then just keep extending this base class. Now let's say that if I want to make it as Firefox. Okay, now what will happen? The Firefox browser will be launched so that you don't need to really come back to this base class at all actually. You just change whatever it is there into the XML and everything else will be done from here. And here goes my Firefox browser, and you can see now it launched into the Firefox browser. Tomorrow you can set it up for Chrome, Firefox, for Safari, for Edge driver, whatever it is there. So this has to be your base class always in your framework. Okay, so that is how we are leveraging the TestNG parameterization concept. So hope this particular session is helpful. Do practice, and if you have any questions, do comment or send me the questions so that we can discuss. So that's pretty much it for today. Stay tuned and do subscribe to this YouTube channel. We will see some more interesting features of TestNG, reporting, and also the framework designing in our upcoming sessions. Thank you for watching.